The Trudeau government is proposing the most authoritarian policy in the history of our country, and the leader of the opposition has said nothing about it. Where is Erin O'Toole, and why isn't he doing his job? I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Now, here on the Candice Malcolm Show, all week we've sort of been laying out the various issues with Justin Trudeau and his sort of recent troubling behavior. I think topping it off must be this policy that was sort of hinted about in the CBC, and the health minister came out last Friday in the afternoon saying that the government was having conversations with the provinces and encouraging them to get ready to roll out a forced vaccination campaign. We're not talking about vaccines available for people. We're not talking about vaccine mandates in order to go to restaurants and maybe get into certain areas of society. We're talking about forced vaccinations. We're talking about a campaign where the government would, by force, impose a health mandate on people, inject something into their body that they do not consent to. That is beyond the conversation in a free society. We have never seen anything like that in this country. It's truly a radical and frightening idea. And you would think that Canadians in lockstep would join to denounce this policy and say, no, this is too far. This is not something that happens in Canada. Instead, we haven't heard a word from Erin O'Toole. We've heard some comments from some of his MPs, but nothing from O'Toole himself. Justin Trudeau continues to divide Canadians. We saw that clip resurface of him back in September calling the unvaccinated, calling them extremists, calling them misogynists and racists. Again, really, really intense rhetoric. We've seen him scapegoating and demonizing and vilifying the unvaccinated for months and months and months. This clip really just reemphasizes this sort of unhinged aspect and way that Trudeau is going about demonizing and trying to encourage people to get vaccinated. The whole issue of dividing Canadians, Trudeau is getting worse. I mean, just look at the example last week. A bunch of young Quebec influencers, teenagers and people in their 20s, young adults, off on a private plane, on a private trip, doing their own thing, minding their own business, having some fun. Justin Trudeau chimes in to say it's a slap in the face. Okay. He also called them idiots and barbarians. Some way for the leader of a country, for the prime minister to speak about people in his own country, to speak about his own citizens. That is completely unacceptable for a prime minister to be labeling people in his country, his own citizens, as idiots and barbarians. This just shows the low level of discourse with Trudeau and sort of the clear disdain that he has for the Canadian public. We've also seen elements of Trudeau coming unhinged and coming undone when he talks about the idea that kids must get vaccinated. That's a pretty nuanced conversation. And what you'll hear from a lot of health experts at the provincial level, doctors and people in the conversation, is that it's a choice. It's up to the parent if they want to vaccinate their child to protect other people in their household and sort of protect people around them. That's their choice. But it seems pretty clear from the science that kids don't need vaccines. Kids don't get sick from COVID. 99.9% of kids who get COVID recover with very few symptoms. So COVID doesn't affect kids the same way as it affects adults. So why would we have a medical intervention that's basically unnecessary? Well, Trudeau has been really adamant that kids must get vaccinated. You got to sign up. You got to vaccinate your kids. Again, all of this would present a great opportunity for the opposition of the country, the leader of the opposition, Erin O'Toole. You basically have Justin Trudeau out there acting like a crazy person, coming undone, coming unhinged, really proposing crazy radical things. And it seems like he's sort of losing his grip on what's acceptable and basically on reality. I think he's really, really out of line with the Canadian public on many of these issues. It's a great opportunity for Erin O'Toole. Erin O'Toole could be out there striking a different tone, showing a different path to Canadians, showing a moderate approach. He could be seen as a sort of reasonable, moderate person in the conversation. But instead, Erin O'Toole is basically absent. You don't see him. You don't hear from him. He doesn't break through his comments and his press releases. They don't break into the media. We don't see stories about him. We barely hear anything. And when he finally does come out and give a press conference or make a statement, his point is like so blurred and mushy, and you don't really know what he's saying. You don't really know what he stands for. He's really failing in his role as the opposition leader to offer a meaningful critique of Trudeau. Meanwhile, Trudeau is lashing out at Canadians. And so to talk about this issue a little more and to get a little deeper into it, I want to bring on a True North reporter, Cosmin Dzsurdzsa. Cosmin is originally from Romania. He's a graduate of the University of Waterloo, and he currently lives in Abbotsford, British Columbia with his wife and child. Cosmin is a senior researcher here at True North. He's a great investigative journalist. He has published some of the biggest and most important reports and stories in True North's history. He's been a big part of our success. And to date, his work has been referenced by CBC News, Rebel News, CTV News, Western Standard, and many other outlets, including outlets, international outlets and outlets all over the world. So, Cosmin, thank you so much for joining the Candice Malcolm Show. It's great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me, Candice. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, so this topic for the show today sort of came from this funny tweet and news story that you had over on True North. So back on January 4th last week, you tweeted, "Has anyone been more irrelevant than Erin O'Toole in the past few weeks?" Your tweet went viral, and then you wrote a piece sort of talking about the reaction to your viral tweet. So first, in your opinion, Cosmin, your estimation of closely following the news, what is the problem with Erin O'Toole? Where has he been for the last few weeks?
Well, I think that word irrelevant really strikes at the heart of the matter. How many Canadians even know who Erin O'Toole is if you would ask them on the street, right? He hasn't been very visible. He hasn't been very vocal. And as you mentioned, this is a perfect opportunity for Erin O'Toole to really stand out, to provide a vision to Canadians, an alternative vision to the divisive one that Trudeau is currently plunging us into.
And so you put out this tweet because O'Toole just wasn't really doing the job that he should be doing. And tell us a little bit about the reaction and what prompted you to write that news article about the sort of virality of the tweet and people commenting on O'Toole's absence.
For sure. I mean, the most common reaction was who? Erin O'Toole. And I think that's the case for many people. They just don't have a sense of who he is. And if you just read the comments, that's the sense I'm getting from the majority. And it's also related in the polls, because if you look at the recent polls coming out, I think about half of his party doesn't approve of him, and he's the lowest polling leader out of all of the federal main party leaders. So I think that tweet was a reflection of just the general sentiment and attitude towards the leader of the opposition.
Well, we can give him a little bit of a break and assume, okay, maybe he was just having a slow start after Christmas. Maybe he was still, out at his cottage or whatever he was doing in family mode and hadn't quite kicked back into political mode yet. Yeah, I think your tweet and your story, which was January 4th, really kind of woke him up, because after that came out, we did start to see a little bit more of a reaction from him. However, it doesn't really seem to break through. So if you were the opposition leader, Cosmin, or if you were advising him, or if you were, part of that team, what would you be saying? What could Erin O'Toole be saying differently to kind of penetrate the media and the media narrative and actually say something that Canadians might want to join on board and follow his party over?
Personally, if I was advising him or in that position, I would be a little bit more aggressive and going out into the media. Right now we're not in Parliament, but there are plenty of opportunities to either take the message directly to voters using social media, or going out on radio and television and really blasting back some of the messaging that Trudeau and other Liberal Party members have been putting out, and really putting it out there, so that Canadians can hear loud and clear what the government thinks about millions of Canadians in this country. And it's not a nice message, right? Trudeau has called them racist, extremist, misogynists, while speaking about people who have refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine. But that's not the beginning for Trudeau, because he's been doing this for a while. His minister of former minister of heritage was calling people extremists for simply opposing an internet censorship bill. So I think it's part of the brand for the Liberals, and O'Toole's team has a lot of material to work with out there if they wanted to push back and really take down Trudeau a level.
Absolutely. Well, there's so many opportunities, and I think no better an opportunity than the announcement or the story and the press conference that we saw on Friday, and the story that came out afterwards, where the health minister was hinting and sort of encouraging provinces to bring about a forced vaccination campaign, not a vaccine mandate where you need to show your papers to get into certain parts of society, but forcing Canadians, like a mandatory forced vaccination campaign, which is, again, above and beyond anything that we're seeing anywhere in the world right now. It's truly authoritarian. We saw some reaction, Cosmin, from a couple of MPs. So I'll read those tweets. Michael Cooper, who's the MP up in St. Albert, Edmonton, he says, "This is outrageous. Justin Trudeau's government is entering into truly dangerous authoritarian territory. State-imposed involuntary medical interventions are un-Canadian and have no place in a free and democratic society." That's absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. And it would have been nice to hear that from Erin O'Toole himself. Instead, he's got his MPs out there who are probably just saying this on their own. Garnet Janis likewise said, "No, vax rates are very high in Canada. Provinces are backing off vax requirements for essential workers because they need the workers. Even if this were desirable in principle, which it's not, we have no capacity to enforce this." And again, another MP, Jeremy Patzer, an MP from Cypress Hill Grasslands in Saskatchewan, says, "Extremely ignorant and frankly shocking that the health minister of a democratic country would say this. Vaccine mandates were wrong from the very beginning. It is increasingly clear that they are a public policy failure. They are ruining livelihoods, clogging supply chains, stifling our economy, eroding medical privacy, dividing society, all the while doing very little in the way of actually combating COVID." So pretty strong words from three of his MPs. But I haven't heard anything from Erin O'Toole on this. Has he chimed in? Does he have any message about this potentially very, very scary and dangerous policy?
Absolutely not. The line he's been going with right now is Trudeau is normalizing lockdowns, which in my eyes is totally milk toast and off the mark, right? Trudeau is not putting people into lockdowns. Factually speaking, it's the premiers. And I just find normalizing lockdowns doesn't really get at the heart of the matter. As those MPs, some of those MPs have mentioned, right? This is an authoritarian move. I think if we go down this path, the Canada that comes out on the other side will be completely different than the one that entered. And I'm not so sure we can call it a liberal democracy anymore after we've given up the notion of bodily autonomy for our citizens. So yeah, no clear messaging from O'Toole as expected, and he's a little late to the mark on this one.
Right. I mean, normalizing lockdowns. Look, we've been locked down on and off for 2 years now. Like the normalization of lockdowns happened a very long time ago. And if that's the best you have at this point in the game, it just, you're absolutely right. It's so weak. And even, I mean, I've got the CBC story in front of me where they talk about how O'Toole accuses Trudeau of normalizing lockdowns by failing to provide rapid tests. It's like, that's such a muddled criticism, because it's like, are you criticizing him for lockdowns, which are, of course, provincial jurisdiction? It's the provinces that are locking down, not the prime minister. He's bringing in his own slew of horrible policies, but the lockdowns are the provinces. So if O'Toole wanted to criticize lockdown, he should be criticizing Francois Legault, Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, and the people who are actually doing the lockdowns. And then saying that he's normalizing lockdowns by failing to provide enough rapid tests. What does one have to do with the other? I mean, it doesn't even seem like he has a coherent message here.
Right, it's very confusing. He needs something much stronger, much clearer that Canadians can get behind. And you would think, the Conservatives recently have been quite media savvy, and you would think with a media team and his advisors behind him, he could pull something out that was consistent and people wanted to hear and to see in their leaders. But I haven't seen that yet. And the clock is ticking. We're likely to head into another election in the next year or two. He's heading towards a leadership review, which is on unstable ground, his leadership. So he's got doesn't have that much time left. So I'd like to really see what he has to offer, and whether he's got some sort of secret weapon that we're all waiting for.
I think if he had a secret weapon, we would have seen it by now. I mean, look, if you go back to the election campaign, it's like he did a pretty decent job of remaining disciplined. He wouldn't really get off of his message. He was really focused on the issues that mattered to him. But as we saw throughout the campaign, part of the issue was that he just wasn't really clear in his positions. He often came across as condescending, and he switched his position on major issues. And I feel like he's running into that same problem now with mixed messaging. And what is his position? For instance, when it comes to vaccine mandates, even during the election, it was like, is he for them? Is he against them? It was kind of this brilliant strategy that Trudeau announced that he was going to call for mandatory vaccines in the civil service, thinking it would be this big wedge issue of the election. And then O'Toole kind of agreed with him. And there was like, there was the gap between what they both believed. It was like a difference without a distinction, or distinction without a difference. And I see that still right now. I'm just going through some of the headlines here. It's like, first, Erin O'Toole urges reasonable accommodation for the unvaccinated. So he's kind of standing up for them, saying that they shouldn't be fired from jobs like truck drivers because we can't have more problems in the supply chain. We've seen lots and lots of healthcare workers fired from their jobs, especially nurses, because they're unvaccinated, only to be brought on later because the healthcare system is so desperate for workers. So here's Erin O'Toole on January 6th calling for reasonable accommodation. But then, on the same day, he's saying that everyone must get vaccinated. It's your responsibility. You can get your questions answered. It's just not clear what he's saying. And then the same day, he defends the vaccine mandate for Canadian Armed Forces. So he's saying that making sure as many people are vaccinated as possible needs to be the first priority of the Canadian Armed Forces. So it's like, even now, he ran into that problem during the election. It's now 4 months later in January 2020, and he's still providing a totally bland mixed messaging. What do you make of it? Where do you think Erin O'Toole stands on vaccine mandates?
Well, that's a difficult question because there's a difference between where one personally stands on an issue and where one officially stands on an issue. I think Erin O'Toole, from what we've seen, he's playing some sort of middle flip-flopping game. I'm not sure what the strategy is behind it. It goes all the way back to the election, painting himself as a true blue conservative, but then going red once things started to get tough. He flip-flopped on guns, he flip-flopped on the CBC, and as you mentioned, even on the mandates, when they introduced the mandate for parliamentarians, he was flip-flopping back then as well. So Erin O'Toole, the flip-flopper, that's where he stands in my eyes.
That's too bad. The other thing I find kind of interesting is that sometimes on social media, I'll see like a very strong message from the Conservatives. I know if you get their emails, it's like their emails read like they really have a different view and a different worldview and different perspective from the Liberals. Like a tweet that came out on January 10th, Canadian Conservatives want to see an end to lockdowns, restrictions on your liberty, and the ongoing impact of mental wellness in our society. That's a much stronger message than what Erin O'Toole himself says. So why do you think there's this gap between the sort of, general messages of the party, some of the stronger points put out by members of Parliament, and then when it comes to O'Toole itself, it's like you can't muster the courage to say these kind of things in plain language?
I think that's reflective of a general sort of division within the party. People who want to stick to conservative values versus people who want to bring the party closer to the center, closer to the Liberals, to the point where they're indistinguishable. So I think we're seeing it spill out into their very messaging. But it is an issue of division and where this party goes from here on out, because it really is a matter of the very identity of the Conservative Party. And I don't think Erin O'Toole is a positive version of that identity for the future.
It's too bad because they have such a good opportunity with this prime minister and with the direction they're going. So many Canadians would want to have an alternative, but it's like they don't really see an alternative with O'Toole because his messaging isn't very strong. And, it's like it's like Erin O'Toole doesn't want to go offside with like the legacy media and the sort of fancy people. So he wants to stay very much in the center, and it's too bad because there's a huge missed opportunity. Well, Cosmin, I really appreciate the work that you do here at True North. You're a great reporter, and yeah, thank you so much for joining the show. We'll have to have you on again at some later point.
Thanks, Candice. Anytime. Would love to.
All right, that was Cosmin Dzsurdzsa with True North. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.